It's reported that last week's violent protests and looting will impact over 150,000 jobs. The question now is, what impact will this situation have on South Africa's potential to attract new investors and maintain its current investors? To help us answer that and more, we're joined by President of South African United Business Confederation, Babu George Sebulela. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Let's talk about this time that the business owners are finding themselves in. They're not only counting the losses, but they also are having to have some difficult conversations with some of the employees to say that, unfortunately, they have to cut their contracts.
Yeah, that's correct. Thank you so much for inviting the South African United Business Confederation for these important discussions. You're quite correct. It's a very challenging situation when you are an employer and you have to really retrench people for really an issue that is beyond your control, and that's quite very sad. At this present moment, South Africa is really under strain. This strain has started really long before the looting and destruction of property started. It started long before COVID started, and this is really quite a very challenging situation. Under that difficult scenario of or situation of COVID, then suddenly we see this looting that really impacted the national GDP to an amount of over 50 billion rand, which is quite very worrying.
And this, as you say, is happening at a time when business people are still trying to adjust to the COVID-19 pandemic, and now they're finding themselves having to make sense of what's happening. What economic impact do you see here? Because we did get some figures from the government, especially in eThekwini. They're saying that the impact will be around 20 billion, and this is going to be making things very difficult going forward.
Look, I do believe, in fact, the number is more than 50 billion rand impact on the national GDP. If you saw the number that they're talking about, it's only specifically, mainly more related to retail industry. But remember, there's a long value chain that happens now. For example, the delay in terms of the manufacturing industry, in terms of delivering goods from point A to point B was hugely impacted. In fact, I'm sure you saw some of the statement that was issued by Toyota, for example, to the government of KZN to say we need to see a plan, and that is outside the 20 billion. If you look at the Road Freight Association, you would understand that goods are transported from Gauteng to KwaZulu-Natal around the port area. You can imagine the value chain in that area, how much impact. That is outside the 20 billion rand that KZN is talking about. And furthermore, literally the motor industry in totality, Nissan has issued a statement around the transport of parts and goods and so on. So this is a serious impact to the country, unfortunately, at the time when we're trying to deal with vaccination process. You can imagine the pharmaceutical industry in terms of delivering medicine from one point to another. It's not really counted on the 20 billion. So the number, as I say, it's an estimate of 50 billion, but if you look at the entire value chain, the numbers are quite huge.
And when you look at investor concerns, this may discourage some of those that have been looking to invest, particularly in the country, not only in these two provinces, and thus can stall economic activity.
We were very fortunate in the country that this happened in KZN and Gauteng. But as you know, South Africa has got 9 provinces, which are also huge on their own, the Western Cape, to such an extent. So let's look at what the investors look for when they come to the country. Firstly, they want to make sure that the infrastructure of the country is well established. Secondly, they want to make sure there's a good telecommunication infrastructure in the country. Thirdly, there is enough energy to be able to be supplied so that industries can operate and generate income. And then they will also look at the impact of the justice system, the stability of the justice system, and how robust is the security of the country. So if you look at what transpired with this looting and destruction of property, fortunately it only happened for very few days. And the question was, we're not going to be measured by the looting, but we're going to be more measured by how the government responds in terms of dealing with that situation. And we were very lucky that it happened 3 to 4 days, which really doesn't make much impact in terms of the country. And this is evidenced by the response of the rating agencies, which all of them just to a certain extent said we are quite a very stable country. They don't see much impact, and in a very good way, we must take into consideration that this kind of rioting situation have happened in many other parts of the world. In France, as you know, it ran for over 3 to 6 months of rioting that was taking place in Hong Kong. If you remember, Hong Kong was destroyed to the ground. So what we have seen, even though the perception of the investors from outside is how government responded, gives a positive impact to the investors.
And when you talk about this positive impact, I'd like us to look at another situation. We keep hearing about the assistance for some of those that lost their businesses and how helping them rebuild could help. What do you see at a practical level as being help that could ensure that some of the businesses that were damaged and really vandalized are then coming back again, and this real threat of job losses is not a realized dream?
Here is a challenge. I think let's analyze the situation. One is you're a businessman, you're a company, you have to take insurance for your business in terms of making sure that the goods are insured. That's number one. But if you go lower to the SMMEs, the small businesses, the chances that they've got insurance is zero. So the big industries are insured and they're going to claim from those industries. But the impact is, even if you are insured, to re-implement your current position could take even longer than 6 to 12 months in making sure that you're fully operational to that level. So the first point is the insurance. If you don't have insurance, this is where the government comes in. And we understand that government has to come up with various solutions in dealing with this situation. If you recall, from the 500 billion that was announced by government as a relief package stimulus, only at least about 41% of that amount of money, which equates to close to about 290 billion rand, was never used by government. Only 200 billion rand was utilized. So you can see there's a huge amount of money that was left. We talked about the 200 billion rand loan guarantee scheme. Only 18 billion of that amount of money was utilized. And there has been a number of challenges. So we want to see government speedily to review that loan guarantee scheme in making sure that those businesses can be able to access it. And firstly would be the ensuring that the distribution channels are not only going to be limited to commercial banks, because you can imagine the criteria of funding it makes it very difficult for those businesses to access the capital, because the criteria hasn't changed, even if it's underwritten by government, Reserve Bank and National Treasury combined. And we expect also a number of interventions to be done. For example, the property owners, for those small businesses, we expect them to be considerate for those who want to restart their business to have a holiday period on paying rental. And that will assist those businesses to start and develop. For the insurance companies, we expect them to speedily settle those that are insurance as quick as possible for them to be in the business, and the likes of Sasria from the government point of view as a government insurance to also move speedily and ensure that there is enough capacity to assist those businesses.
All right. Thank you so much for your time tonight. That was George Sebulela, President of the South African United Business Confederation.